Hello again, James here from Q-SYS, and I'm here today to tell you all about the latest features and improvements in Q-SYS Designer 9.9. Let's take a look. Now, let's begin with video because there are a number of video improvements in this Q-SYS Designer release, starting with auto framing. Auto framing is being added to all of the NC series cameras, including the smaller NC110 and the larger PTZ models. And now the camera can crop its 4K sensor to automatically provide the best framing for faces it detects in the scene. This is happening on the device, on the camera itself, rather than using processing in the core. And of course, this allows you to have fewer camera presets on the touch panel, automate more of that camera framing by just letting it happen automatically. Now, in addition, this gives us a face count control in Q-SYS Designer. So now we actually get a number inside the camera component telling us how many faces are currently being detected. And you could, of course, use this for some automations. For example, when face count is 0 for a period of time, the room switches off, or maybe the reverse of that. You could also use it with some Lua scripting to maybe provide you with some data on the room usage over time. Now, you can also use this auto framing with our automatic camera preset recall plugin. This means that your presets for the cameras could perhaps be a little bit wider, a little bit more generous, and then you will allow auto framing to frame in nice and closely on the subject when they're picked up by that camera preset. Hello everyone, here I am in the training room at Q-SYS UK, and we're going to take a look at the new auto framing feature in the new version of Q-SYS Designer. So here we are with an NC110, which is at the trainer's desk. And you can see there's a new auto framing tab that's been added in 9.9. Now here we can enable auto framing, and we have a few other controls as well, which we'll take a look at now. Now we've enabled auto framing, and you can see the camera is automatically zooming in on my face. And as I move around here, you will see that the camera will respond after a short delay and then pan towards me. We also have the ability to turn on face count, and this can be really powerful, where we can actually get a number of faces in Designer and of course use that to do certain automations. And if you like, you can also outline the faces on the video stream itself. Now we have some options here for the frame itself. So we can adjust the padding, and this is the amount of space it's going to put around the face. So when it's set to medium, you can see that we get more view of the space around the person, not just their face. And we also have the transition speed, which I can set to instant, and then you'll see there's no panning that occurs. It just cuts to the next best frame when somebody moves. Let's switch to a different camera. At the back of the room, I have an NC 12x80 in the ceiling. Now these PTZ NC series can also do auto framing in addition, of course, to the mechanical movement. I'll set this camera to its home position so you can see what room it's in. Of course, here we are in the training room, and there you can see all of the desks. And what can be useful in this scenario is to have a camera with a very wide preset over a certain area. So here you can see where the trainer might stand, and they could very well move around in front of the projector screen, around their desk, and now we can enable auto framing. So this is perfect for remote learning. If somebody is going to be moving around, like me here, they could come over to a different area, they could come up to interact with a student, and the auto framing is just going to keep them in frame within the full frame that's set, of course, by the PTZ movement. So here, of course, we have quite a slow transition speed, which means it's not too distracting for the far-end viewer. So there you have it. That's auto framing in Designer 9.9, which is now a feature on all of the NC series cameras. Added in Q-SYS Designer 9.8.1, and now also in 9.9, we have the new NV21 networked video endpoint, the latest addition to the NV family. Like the NV32, it can be used as an encoder or a decoder, but with a much smaller form factor and with the addition of USB Type-C for a single cable solution, giving content input, USB audio and video bridging, and device charging. Now, the next video feature I'd like to discuss was actually announced earlier on in the year at our Activate launch, which is the NV32 Core Mode video streaming license. Now, just a reminder, NV32 has been around for a little while, and Core Mode was announced shortly after launch, which allowed you to change it from being a peripheral into being a Q-SYS core. Now, when you did that, you lost the streaming functionality. So you're not encoding and decoding video anymore, but you are using that box as a core, as a control processor, an audio processor, and as a 3x2 HDMI switcher as well. But you might now want to add in an NV21 to be able to send some video to that device, but you couldn't do that while it's in core mode. Alternatively, you might want to use your NV32s as peripherals, as encoders and decoders, but then you would also need to add something like a Core Nano to manage that system. Well, thanks to some hard work from our engineering team, you can now use the NV32H in core mode whilst encoding or decoding, thanks to this new feature license. Let's take a look at how this works inside Q-SYS Designer. Let's take a look at how we can use the NV32 in core mode with encoding or decoding in the latest version of Q-SYS Designer. Now here you can see I've got a blank design with a Core 8 Flex, which is of course the default. And just for comparison, I've also added an NV21 and an NV32 in peripheral mode. Now we're all used to the NV32 in peripheral mode. We can drag in this HDMI I/O component and we can change that device between an encoder or a decoder. And of course on the decoder we get those AV input pins there. Now in core mode, we of course need to change the core in the design file. So I'm going to take this Core 8 Flex and change that into an NV32 in core mode. Now in this case, we don't have the option for encoding or decoding. We just have this HDMI I/O component because historically, when it's in core mode, the NV32 is still a 3x2 switcher, but it's not able to do any encoding or decoding. However, in version 9.9, you can see that in the properties, we have a new device type field where we can change it from purely core mode or to a decoder or to an encoder in addition to core mode. Now, I'm going to change this to be a decoder, and it's also going to be my core for this system. And what I'm going to add here is an encoder. I'm going to use the NV21 that I already have in my inventory here. So let's go and grab the NV21. And with the NV21, we can add an HDMI source component. We can also add a USB-C source component and allow the user to switch between those for the AV stream. So let's add those in. And we can see one of those says USB-C AV source and one of them says HDMI AV source. And let's wire up the AV pin from our encoder to our decoder. And just for fun, let's also add an NV32 as a peripheral, make that an encoder, and we could also send a couple of streams from here as well. And of course, just like any NV32 decoder, when it's in core mode as well, we can still switch between a really large number of AV streams. Now, of course, we need to add a display, and there we have our basic video wiring for this system. Normally, you'd need to add a Core Nano at this point to actually run everything, but here we can just use the decoder also in core mode. Now, looking at check design, you can see that some of my network capability is used up by these video streams. Also, some of my signal processing is used up by the CPU needing to manage some of these video streams, but it's a relatively small amount. Now, I could also add here another display, just like any other decoder. We can add two displays to the NV32. And now when we run check design, you're going to see that my network usage has gone up because now, of course, we can decode two streams simultaneously, not just one. And so you can see that really we're not taking any of the CPU power away from the core when it's in core mode for audio and control processing. But of course, it's important to bear in mind that higher encoding or decoding channel counts will use up some more network streams that you might otherwise be using for audio. Next, let's talk about some of the ways in which Designer 9.9 improves monitoring and management of Q-SYS systems. So in 9.9, we've introduced support for creating, exporting, and deleting manual cloud backups, in addition to the automatic cloud backup options that were already available. We've also added support for restoring from a backup, regardless of whether it was created manually or automatically. On the notifications side, you can now create webhook notifications from an Enterprise Manager event. Really useful for writing to Slack or to a Teams channel whenever an alert is created. Now let's take a look at the Core 610, which is of course one of the most powerful Q-SYS cores. However, even the Core 610 is eclipsed by something like the Core 5200, which has double the processing power, double the network audio channel count. And there are situations in a particularly large project where you might want a little bit more than what the Core 610 can offer, but you don't need to go all the way to a Core 5200. Well, much like with the Core 8 Flex and the Core Nano, you can now purchase a scaling license for the Core 610, which gives you additional networked audio channel count, acoustic echo cancellation, general DSP performance, and the NMT1 microphone count. It increases all of those by 50%. So that's the scaling license for the Core 610. Additionally, you can now purchase a 256-channel software-based Dante license for the 610 rather than the 128-channel license that was previously available. Now, there are many other features, of course, in 9.9, far too many for me to go into all the detail here, but I should also mention expanded CEC control functionality on the NV series, an improved public and metrics API for Enterprise Manager, the ability to get product serial numbers now in Core Manager and Peripheral Manager, lower latency software-based Dante, just to name a few, but of course for all the latest updates and bug fix information, please do read the full release notes. Now, that's it from me. Please do go to Q-SYS.com to download Designer 9.9, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.